This month's podcasts are sponsored by Aubergine Legal. Do you sometimes worry that your business isn't meeting all its legal compliance requirements and wonder if you're ticking all the legal boxes? Are you losing sleep worrying about a piece of legislation that you may or may not be complying with? Perhaps you need some help with your client contracts or your data protection compliance. Or maybe you're worried that your website doesn't have the right documents or legal notices in the right place. Perhaps you have a brand that you want to protect with a trademark. How about if you could outsource it all and eliminate all of your worries? If so, then get in touch with Aubergine Legal, a friendly commercial legal consultancy offering practical and clear commercial legal advice without the overwhelming legal jargon, taking the worry away and helping you to protect your business and minimise your risks. Aubergine offers a free 30-minute consultation if you have any questions or want to find out if they can help, and you can access this link and book your free 30-minute call via the link in the show notes.
Welcome to the Bring Your Product Ideas to Life podcast. Practical advice and inspiration to help you create and sell your own physical products. Here's your host, Vicky Weinberg.
On today's episode, we're going to talk about finances for small business. Couple of reasons I want to do this episode, really. One is I think it's an area that, as personally myself as a small business owner, this is probably the thing I knew least about and struggled most with. So I'm really hoping this will be helpful. Also, as this week's guests, I say guests, we do have two of them, point out getting your finances right and knowing what to do can be massively helpful and avoid a lot of stress in the short term and in the long term, really. And also, this is something that people often ask me about. They'll say, oh, should I set up as a sole trader or should I set up as a limited company? I don't know those answers, and in fact anything sort of accounting wise, I don't know the answers really, and my advice would always be speak to an accountant. But what I'm hoping is that today's episode will give you a bit of an overview of what you need to do as a small business to manage your finances, the kind of things you need to be keeping track of, the absolute fundamentals. And then, of course, should you need more advice and support, as I'm sure you will from time to time, than what's covered in this episode, then you can always go and speak to an accountant. But I think this might be just a really good starting off point. So I'd like to introduce this week's guests. So they're Laughton and Wendy Ross. Laughton and Wendy are a husband and wife team of chartered accountants with over 30 years experience. So they run Tonbridge Accountants and they want to share the wealth of experience with like-minded entrepreneurs and ambitious business owners, supporting them to achieve their goals and grow their business. They're passionate about using their skills and knowledge to take care of the financial side of things so that you can focus on what you're passionate about, which is your business. So after that introduction, I would now love to introduce you to Laughton and Wendy and talk all things finance and accounting. So hi to you both and thank you for being here.
Hi Vicky. Thank you for having us here.
No problem. Well, thank you for coming on and talking to me. So can you start by giving an introduction to yourselves and your business, please?
Yes, my name is Wendy and I am the founder of this firm. A little bit of a background. I used to work in the city with HSBC Bank PLC. I gave up my career to look after my kids and I got bored not long after, so I decided to set up my own accounting firm. It was an easy decision for us given our background. My husband is also a chartered accountant. He's on the call here, Laughton. So I made a swift proposal to him about setting up a firm together. We have always been a big supporter of local businesses. And from speaking to local businesses and friends, we spotted a gap in the market where small businesses could really benefit from having an access to a great accountant, helping them to grow their business. We focus on having a great working relationship with our clients so we can work as a team closely.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
And hi Laughton as well, because you're obviously here and I will hear from you a little bit later.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, we're happy to answer your questions today. Wendy and I are going to take those between us. I'm more of the techie one. Wendy's more of the people person. So we'll share those out and hopefully cover everything you need.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Well, I'm just going to throw questions at you and then I'll leave it up to you two who takes what. So let's start right at the beginning with why do small businesses need an accounting and a bookkeeping system? Perhaps actually we can talk a little bit about what those entail and what the differences are, and why is it important that they think about this right from the outset?
With respect, bookkeeping is a highly skilled function when done properly. Most clients will never be able to do their bookkeeping at a standard we operate at, and we quite often have had to clean up a lot of mistakes when clients do their own bookkeeping. The most important thing that micro businesses can get wrong is keeping records. They need to be diligent in their record keeping. How many times have we asked, how is your records kept? And quite often we get a long pause from new clients, and then followed by, what do you mean by that? It is quite vital. I think bookkeeping is probably a bit of a scary big word for most people, especially when new businesses. And we try and simplify and break it down to, it's really just keeping tab of your income and expenses. So you basically, in a nutshell, have a folder of all your receipts and invoices and your bank statements.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So it sounds like what you're saying is the most important thing is that you're keeping records of what goes in and out of your business.
Yes, and I just want to add, like, for example, if a HMRC officer decides to look at your accounts and see your records are incomplete, how are you going to persuade HMRC that you didn't make that money? So, the advice is you need to get a receipt for everything and write everything down.
Okay, so it sounds like right from the start, the important thing is that you keep track of what you spend, you keep track of what comes in. And how would you do that? Or what are some options for how to do that? I mean, is it okay just to have a folder full of receipts, or should you be logging this somewhere? What would you recommend?
Yeah, I'll answer that one, Wendy. Let's take a typical small business or a new business, because I think the complexity of your bookkeeping really depends on the size of your outfit, what you're doing. If it's just one person and you're doing something straightforward, your record keeping is going to be a lot more simple than a huge big organisation with a dozen employees, something like that. So you can really start off, in the simplest terms, just with a manual set of records. Keep all the bills, keep all the invoices, write everything down. That's if you've got quite a small number of transactions, that might be suitable for you. As you grow and you've got more passing through the business, you're going to find that's very time intensive to complete that. So you might want to look into a spreadsheet, possibly some software. A simple Excel workbook might be fine for a growing business. As you get a few more transactions in, you might want to have accounting software to deal with it for you, just because of the time that's going to save you. You want to spend the time growing your business, developing your business, dealing with your customers, and not updating spreadsheets all day. So the software can really speed up some of that bookkeeping.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And I know we're jumping around a bit in terms of what we're talking about, but I think that leads on nicely too. So I know that bookkeeping, as you mentioned, Wendy, is quite a skill and it can be quite time consuming. So is it possible for small businesses, particularly when they start out, to do their own accounting? I know that ideally, maybe you would work with an accountant, but is it something you feel that people can do? And if so, what are some of the options for things like software that might help out a little bit?
I think this is quite it's a little bit tricky question, because you can absolutely do your own accounting or your bookkeeping if you know what you're doing. There a lot of people have different expertise or knowledge. So we have clients who do their own bookkeeping, and as well as we have clients who are completely uncomfortable when you talk about keeping invoices or receipts. I think for our client, if their business is simple and very small, they can use an Excel spreadsheet to keep tab of their income and expenses. But most of our clients use an accounting software. We work with Xero, and it's a great tool. But then again, it's quite important for us to be able to I think for clients who use Xero, we have an overview where we share. We can actually see what they are trying to do, and if they struggle with any transaction or anything in Xero, we are able to go in and support and correct the errors if there's any.
I think just to add to that, Wendy, the software these days is great. It's all cloud-based. It's really easy to use. It's really user-friendly. But the guys who design it do such a great job with their marketing. They have everyone convinced that the software does everything for you. And it really doesn't. You need to understand what it's doing, how it's working in the background. And also that what it produces is only as good as what you put into it. So if you don't know what you're feeding in, when you're doing that and why you're doing it, you're not going to get a reliable data out of it. So that's something we spend time with people on, just explaining how it works and getting them into a little routine. I think with a lot of this stuff, once you're in a routine with it, as long as nothing changes, you can progress quite nicely and be comfortable doing your own things.
Yeah, so if you ask me, can small businesses do their own accounting? I was almost going to say it's a bit like, if it's probably an equivalent of a householder saying to a professional plumber, for example, I'll just go ahead and plumb in my new bathroom. It is all fine until, for example, you have an unpleasant leak through your ceiling and having to call the plumber back. You will have to then pay an emergency fee, and you probably have to even have your whole bathroom ripped up. So, it is okay until something goes wrong. And from our perspective, if we are the plumber, how would we feel if our customers insist to, do their own plumbing, and then the remedial work and the repair work, it's not gonna, most of the time it takes probably a longer time to work out what went wrong and how do we go about to fix it, and you probably end up with higher cost than what you were going to start from initially.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I think you're right. And one key thing I'm taking from everything you've both said is that it doesn't matter what software you use, or if you have a spreadsheet or you use something else, it's all about what you put in and what you need to keep track of. So what are some of the things that you need to keep track of, as well as income and expenditure? So let's maybe get really specific. So what kind of expenditure should you be tracking? And what is it? And, is it any kind of business expense? I think that might just be quite helpful to people to kind of think about the things they need to be taken into account.
Okay, so I'd start by saying you need to capture every single pound spent by the business, whatever that's spent on. So that's, it all needs to tie back to your bank. At the very beginning, set up a separate bank account. If you haven't done that, it's really, really important to have a separate account for your business, so that the funds that are related to the business aren't mixed up with all your personal stuff. A lot of people don't do that at the beginning, and they have a very hard time working out, what's their own income and expenses versus what's the business. So I think that's a starting point. Get that done. You've got your bank statements then, which will give you all of the income and expense, and you can track that. But separate to the bank statement, you need to write down everything, and you need to categorize it. So what's the money being spent on? And in very simple terms, you're either buying assets to use in your business. So you might be buying equipment, you might be buying things you actually use to make things with. You could actually just be incurring expenditure. It could be designing a website, or buying some materials, or paying some wages for someone to help you. So you need to categorize it into those different things, and knowing exactly what you're spending it on and why, so that it can be recorded correctly. It's really important, particularly on the asset side of things, because you do get tax allowances on things that you're spending money on. So it's really important to know what you spent it on and why, so that you can make sure you're getting the right credit for that when it comes to recording it in your tax return.
Thank you. And we'll move on to talk about tax returns in a minute. I think that was a really good point you made about the bank account, because I agree that probably a lot of people don't do that, particularly if they're going to be operating as a sole trader initially. But I suppose in that situation, there's nothing wrong with you taking out another account in your name that you use solely for your business. I assume that's perfectly fine. You don't need a business to have a separate account for your business, is what I'm saying, do you?
Yeah, and I think new businesses shouldn't be, put off with the thought of like, oh, I've heard reasons like, oh, I don't want to set up a separate bank account for the business, and you ask why, and they say to you, it's the cost. But I think you have to respect and treat your business like a proper business. If you don't, then you're never gonna sort of like, have that mindset of actually trying to run a business properly with whatever costs that associated to running a business.
That makes sense. Thank you. And would you recommend in that case that you would get a business bank account? Because I know they operate slightly differently to personal bank accounts. Even let's say, we'll talk about the differences in a minute, but even if you're running as a sole trader, for example, would you still suggest that you get a business bank account, or does it not matter so much? Is the more important thing that you have a separate account?
From an accounting point of view, it doesn't really matter. It's just the fact that it's separate is the main thing.
Okay.
But from a banking point of view, they all have sort of different requirements, different rules, different products. So I'd say it's definitely worth checking with your bank.
Yeah.
To see what's suitable. But what I find these days is, banking industry is very competitive. They want business banking customers. There's some great products out there, and a lot of them, they'll do special deals where it's maybe there's no fees for the first so many months, or some of them have really, really low fees or really good deals. So it's what puts people off. They think it's going to be really expensive.
Yeah, but it's not.
It's not always. So it's worth just researching that and checking. But the main thing is keeping it separate, so that you've got your personal stuff and your business stuff away from each other.
Okay, thank you. So now we've touched on this a little bit. I've mentioned sole traders and limited companies. And I guess a question that even I hear people ask quite a lot is, what's the difference and which one should I do? So could you talk about that a little bit, please?
Absolutely, yeah. I can start with this one. I'll try not to go into too much detail because this can get really complicated. It's what I would say is it really, really does depend on your circumstances. So when someone says, should I be a limited company? Should I be a sole trader? There isn't just one answer. There's a lot of different factors to it, and what might be suitable for one person might not be suitable for someone else, even if they're in the same business or the same industry, depending on their other circumstances. It can really affect it. But to start off with, just to keep it simple, sole trader is the most basic way of operating. It probably has the least amount of requirements in terms of, tax and filing regulations. It's less complex than if you were a limited company. And therefore it's just slightly less admin. You don't have to, if you're a sole trader, you don't have to produce annual accounts in accordance with accounting standards, file them with Companies House, comply with all the company law. There's volumes and volumes of laws you have to comply with as a company director, and you avoid all that as a sole trader. That said, as a sole trader, you don't have limited liability that you would get with a company. So, you are the business. Any liabilities that you incur are your own. So if you're taking part in something which, from a business point of view, might be slightly higher risk, you just have to be aware that you're actually putting your personal assets at risk. So it's just to keep that in mind. And if you're doing a straightforward business that's very simple, that probably doesn't matter. If you're kind of borrowing money to invest in premises and things like that, that might be something you want to consider in a bit more detail.
I think it's all very like case on case basis, isn't it? Because we also have to take into account of the client's tax position before you decide whether a limited company option or a sole trader will be better.
Yeah, that's right, Wendy. A lot of people sort of, depending on what you do. So let's just say if you have a job and you've maybe started a business, aside from that, maybe you've got something you're really interested in, you're thinking, I'm not sure if it's a viable business, you grow it a little bit and you're doing that alongside your other work. Well, maybe you don't want to be a sole trader because you're going to want to decide when you take money out of the business, because as an individual, you get taxed on everything you earn. So if you're a sole trader, that those profits just get added to all your other income and you're taxed on all of it. If you're a limited company, you can leave the funds in the business, invest them, and draw those down as and when you need them. So you've got more flexibility over actually taking funds out of the business. So it really does depend on your individual circumstances.
Yeah, and I think with like everything else, flexibility will come with a bit of a price as well. Like it costs more to run an operated limited company versus sole trader. So there's always pros and cons, but this is where it's important, where if you speak to an accountant, they can weigh up what is the best setup that you should take.
Yeah, and thank you. I think that's really useful, because I know lots of people do get hung up on that. And I think I'm right in thinking, aren't I, that there's nothing wrong with starting as a sole trader and then registering a company a bit later. What I'm trying to say is it shouldn't stop you from starting.
Yeah, definitely.
Not at all. I think, you can change it over time. And there's lots of companies that I've seen that have started as, they've started with one thing, they've gone to something else, maybe later on they've changed back again. And you really just need to do what's best for you and your business at the point in time. Tax laws change, rules change. You need to constantly reassess that your structure is right for you. So I'd say it's definitely worth revisiting that. Don't pick something and stick with it forever.
Yeah, and that's really helpful. Thank you. And it sounds like it's definitely worth, if you're not sure, speaking to an accountant and talking about your individual situation, because as you say, depending on that will have an impact on which would be best for you.
Yeah, because I'm going to admit, like, we have seen businesses come to us as limited company structure where they could have just done it via sole trader, would have made a lot of, made their life a lot easier. But again, that's why it's dangerous. Do not just take advice from what you read or what you hear from friends. I think you really need to know and speak to someone.
Yeah, thank you for that. And also, just to dispel something else that I hear quite often, setting up as a limited company is quite straightforward, isn't it? It's not very expensive and it's simple to do. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's very simple. You can do it online. It's very quick. You can kind of whiz through it in a few minutes.
Setting up is very easy, but I think where people fail to understand is the responsibility that comes with it being a company director. That's a lot.
I think that's the thing. I think they've made it so easy, so quick, that some people just automatically go down that route even without thinking it through. I think, if you've done your research, you've decided that's for you, it is easy, go ahead and do that online, but make sure you understand what you're taking on when you do it, because there's a lot of responsibility that goes with it, and there's a lot of rules and laws to comply with.
And how many times have we seen businesses setting up, I've done it, and then they realize after 6 months it's not working, and I need to wind this down. Again, that's costs and admin time, and it is not the most straightforward thing.
Yeah, opening it's very quick and very easy. Closing it down, not so much. So think very carefully that it's the right thing first, because you could end up with a bit of a mess on your hands if you rush into it without knowing what you're taking on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and what are some of the key things that you think people should know if they are thinking of setting up as a company? I know there's so many laws and so many requirements, but what are the sort of the key ones that you think people absolutely need to know?
I think the key ones are that you're obliged to produce a set of accounts for the company, and they have to be prepared to a set of standards, and there are strict rules around that. So, and they have to be filed with Companies House. There's deadlines. If you don't meet the deadlines, there's fines.
You've got the responsibility to HMRC as well.
Yeah, you've got your corporation tax returns to prepare. Again, there's a complex set of rules around those. There's deadlines for filing the returns. There's deadlines for making the payment. There are similar deadlines for individuals, but just with a company, there are a lot more. And the standards that you have to adhere to are more stringent.
And I think a lot of, again, from experience, a lot of directors of a limited company, they don't understand that, they don't realize that they have a duty to actually, again, the most hated word, bookkeeping. They have to keep records. And, there are times where they come to you and they haven't got any records being kept. And it's a case of trying to rebuild what it should be for the last 18 months. Again, most people don't know that, oh, have I got a duty to keep that? Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Okay.
And probably a third thing to mention, really, just to add to that briefly, is that with a sole trader, you are the business. It's just there's no separation. With a limited company, the company is a legal being in its own right. It's completely separate to just because you own it and you're the shareholder. People don't realise that there are very strict rules around what you can take out of the company. People get very confused and they think, well, it's my company. I can kind of take money out whenever I like. There's very strict rules around what you can take, how much, when, whether when you pay it back. There's tax laws around that, and there's all sorts of things to consider. So it's it's a lot more complicated.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting that sense. And I think as well, though, it sounds like that if you are thinking of setting up as a company, that is probably a situation where you probably do need an accountant, and you probably don't want to be doing your own accounting, unless, of course, that's your background and your expertise, because it sounds like the requirements for running a company are something that you possibly might not be able to adhere to on your own. Is that fair to say?
I'd say it's more challenging. I wouldn't say you can't do it. I think it's just making sure you're set up in the right way. So, if you talk to a good accountant, they can work with you. If you express an interest in saying, look, I really want to be involved in the bookkeeping, the best thing is just to have that conversation and say, this is how much time I've got to spend on it. I want to be involved. What's the best way for me to do that? And let them guide you, because they'll say, right, don't touch this bit, because it could go wrong very easily and cause you a lot of problems. This bit's fine. Spend your time doing that. They'll build it up with you over time. If you become really confident in an area and you express an interest in taking on more, they can guide you through what, the next steps, and say, right, now you might want to think about getting involved in this or in that. I'd definitely say don't just kind of go off and do it all without being sure. So it's really important to have that conversation, and I think it's it's that level of trust. They trust you. You want to do the right thing, do the best you can. You trust that they're going to sort of have that discussion, build that relationship, take your advice, and you work together. And you have that flexibility. You can really make it work for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. I think, I was thinking from my point of view, which is that a lot of this seems very daunting. But I also take your point that, I think you need to sort of be involved. You do need to be involved to some degree. And I guess that's the sort of the last thing I'd like to touch on with you is why. Well, first of all, I'm assuming that it is important to know where you are financially, but I should probably pose it as a question. So do you feel that it is important to know where you are financially as a business owner, whether that's as a sole trader, as a company, and why that helps? Because I'm thinking that from my point of view, I'm thinking that probably to some sort of degree, you need to know what's going on with your money in your business. So can you talk a bit about that, please?
I'll make a go, and then Laughton can add on. So a healthy cash balance is crucial for the survival and success of any business. However, just by checking the cash balances, it doesn't give you the full picture. When looking at the strength of your business, you need to consider assets, i.e. money due in, and its liabilities, money it owes out. You need to know how much cash flow you have. Have you got enough to pay? Have you got enough cash to pay your suppliers, your employees, your tax or your VAT bills? Once you've accounted for all that liabilities, and if you're still in a profitable position, you can then consider things like paying yourself dividends during the year, or undertaking investments in your business to grow it, or even things like taking on an additional team member to facilitate the growth. So it's really, really crucial to to know where you are financially, because it can absolutely help with your business decisions. Do you want to add on?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And I think if you look at some examples of where people aren't aware of where they are financially and what can happen, take a simple one. You don't know where you are. You're not sure what your tax bill is going to be. Okay, you get some help with it. You ask an accountant. They say, right, well, this is how much you've got to pay, and it's due in a few weeks' time. You haven't got the cash to pay it. So if you don't know where you are, you haven't planned for that. So you can be faced with an obligation and not be in a position to deal with that. So I think it's vital that you know exactly where you are. Not to worry over it, but just to sort of have the ownership of that and the confidence to know this is where I am, this is what I've got coming up, what you've got coming, what you've got going out. If you've got obligations, you want to make sure that you can meet those when they're due, and you have to plan around that.
Obviously, if you're just starting your business, you can always, use a safe method of putting some money aside, say 20%, and put it aside. I think that would be like, to cover the tax bill, for example. I think that's your basic rule, isn't it?
Yeah, it's always good to put money aside. I think, if you're starting a new business, what's going to really help with this is having a plan. So it doesn't have to be massively complex, but if you're investing some of your own money in a new business, and if you're, I don't know, let's say you're buying assets to produce something with, just as a simple example, you need to know how long you're expecting to recover those costs. All new businesses they're going to take up money to start with as you invest in things. But you need to know how many sales you're expecting over what period, so that you know when you're going to recoup the money on these investments that you've made. I think that's really important. Don't just spend your money blindly, not knowing when or how you're going to get it back, because you get into a mess very quickly. Have a plan. Things won't always go to plan, but if you've got a plan that you can refer back to, that's incredibly helpful.
Yeah, that sounds really sensible. Thank you. I definitely think you're right. Something I see occasionally is where people haven't maybe taken into consideration all the costs, for example, which then makes their margins much less than what they expected. So I guess the clearer picture you have of the financial situation of your business, so what you're spending money on, what it costs, when you're likely to get it back, what you're charging, maybe if you've got a business, whether it's products, services, whatever. I guess all of that helps give you a clearer picture of where you are.
Need to budget in a new businesses, your accounting cost. You definitely need to put that into your.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of things that maybe
can't go up to the year end and just go and realize you need an accountant and say, I haven't got the money. It's like you need to have built it in.
So it sounds like at the outset it's worth thinking about all the things that you might have to spend money on in the next year, let's say, and kind of accounting for that. Because also you touched on earlier sort of your tax bill. So however you set up your business, you are going to have to pay tax at some point.
Yeah, a common mistake that new businesses often face is, you have business owners that are very enthusiastic about their product. It could be something they're really into, they've been doing for a long time, and they're developing it. They're really passionate about it. They focus on the sales and how much it's costing them to sell. And that's really important, but they forget about all those other costs, like when you mentioned your legal fees, your accounting fees, the cost of setting up a website. If you've got to register with the information commissioner, there's a fee for that. You might have bank fees to pay. Go through and figure out all of these costs and make sure you factor those in, because there's no point making a profit on your sale and then, spending all of that straight out the door on all these other things. You've got to make sure you cover all those costs.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. In reality, that's something I have seen a few times, particularly with products, where people have worked out the cost of the product, but as you say, none of the other costs that sort of come after or before that. So yeah, like you say, website hosting and all these things. And then actually that does mean that something that looked profitable initially actually might not be in reality.
And if it's not, sorry, Wendy, just to respond to that, your plan might be that it's not profitable to start with. It's a new business. It might take a while to get those volumes to build things up. So you might end up being loss making for a little while, but as long as you know that you've planned for it and you've actually got the cash to fund that, that's the important bit. It's when you haven't planned for it and you don't know the position you're in, that's when you get into difficulty.
Absolutely.
So just another tip for new businesses. So you have to have a very, very robust business plan to start with, where, and if you can put you can put a lot of challenging costs or factors in it, then at least it would, try and make your business as future-proof as possible.
Absolutely.
Properly list out all the expenses you could think of in running a business. So when you do need a software next time and it's like £35 a month, you can't turn around and say, I can't afford it, because, these are things which you have to, just like website hosting, all that it's all part and parcel of running a business.
Yeah, that makes sense. And absolutely, these things, sometimes unexpected things do crop up, but I think knowing ahead of time makes sense, because as you said, it might be, to start up a business, often you need some level of investment and it can take time before you start making the money back. But at least if okay, the outset initially will be this or roughly this, and I plan to be making a profit in X amounts of months' time, at least you're sort of planning for that. But you're right, to go in blindly, not knowing what you're spending and when you're likely to see it back, I think is a lot more scary, actually.
Have a robust plan, business plan, write it out, and then get your friends to, criticize it as much as they can, because, that really helps give you a better solid picture than just, fluffy ones and just say, oh, you'll be fine. No, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Another big thing people forget is, their own time. There's a cost to that. And, of course, when people are starting a business, they're prepared to put in as much effort as it takes, and they don't really mind. But, as things progress, you may want to actually think about, okay, well, if I'm a limited company, I might want to pay myself a salary. That's a cost that has to be factored in. So, build that into the business plan. If not straight away, at some point that needs to be considered as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think I do know lots of people, as you say, at the outset, maybe don't take a salary or take a very small salary, but there has to be a point, I guess, if you're running it as a business, there has to be at some point where you are taking something from it yourself. Otherwise I'm not saying it can't be a business, but if you're doing it to make money, then you should be taking money for yourself at some point.
Yeah, and you may have other reasons. I think in fact, you've raised a really good point there. There's various different reasons people enter into business. Set out your goals when you start, set out what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve, what are some of your goals, and, discuss those with people who are supporting you. If, for example, discuss your goals with your accountant. If they know what you're trying to achieve, they can help you get there. Because people all want different things. And if you don't know where you're heading, you won't get there.
Yeah, we did a business plan when we set up the firm.
Good. Let's hear it.
Counting fees because, we're going to do it ourselves. So that's fine.
Yeah, and it's good that you're doing that. Especially when you're quite encouraging that. So is there anything else that small businesses sometimes forget to factor in as a cost while we're on that subject? Is there anything that people often, I guess accounting fees is probably one. Is there anything else that you see that people just haven't factored in?
I think their time cost, their own time cost. That's the biggest one, isn't it?
Yeah, their time costs, and I think sometimes as well, it's these little small expenses where it's just, a few pounds here, a few pounds there. They're down at the shops, they pick up something for the business. They forget to record it because they're just doing it as part of their day-to-day, activities. It all adds up, and it's all costs incurred by your business. Make sure you keep the receipts. Make sure you write it all down. Every little bit, sort of it all adds up. So it's definitely worth capturing.
And so one final thing that I've only just thought of actually, while we're talking about capturing things, something that just occurred to me is with lots of us running businesses from home now, is that something else we should be taking into account? So in terms of cost incurred. I know it's probably quite a big subject, but do you see what I mean? I'm thinking that most of us are working out of our homes, but not even considering that.
Absolutely. That has to be factored in. Depending on what you do, how often you work, this can be something very simple. It can be something that's really, really complex. On the very simple end of the scale, the government make it easy for you. They give simplified rules, so it can just be based on the time spent. If you've got something that takes up a lot of, a lot of power, a lot of heat, light, energies, think of an example. Maybe you've set up a cake business and you've got your oven running all day. Your gas bill might be more because of that. You can factor all that in. You need to sort of consider what's appropriate for your trade. There's a really, really complex set of rules around it all. It's definitely worth talking to somebody about what I would say on that topic. There's so many different rules, different rules for companies versus sole traders. So people often get mixed up between them. It's very different. So it's worth taking advice on that.
Yeah, and this is where it comes in, where he reasons out with the client the apportionment, how much to take, what we're claiming. So if you haven't got an accountant to speak with, then you're gonna be following whatever interpretation that you think would be correct. So it's
Well, perfect. No, thank you. I know that's a really big topic. The only reason I wanted to bring it up is I think that there will be people who don't perhaps realise. I mean, I certainly didn't myself realise that you can claim for certain things if you're working from home. So I think even if now everyone's aware of that, that's something they can go and get advice on. But I think it is something that perhaps can easily be overlooked. And I thought, while we're talking about costs, let's talk about the other side as well, because there may be some things you can claim back on the flip side.
I think Laughton raised really good point. Like, if you're cake making, for example, then the cost will be quite different compared to, for example, like if we work from home with our computer, that's quite different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it does depend what you're doing. Maybe you do something that has heat lamps or something, and that's using a lot of electricity or whatever it is. Yeah, I see what you mean. But I guess it's just worth, I guess the main reason I wanted to bring it up is say that everyone's aware that you can claim, there are things you can claim back as well as things that you have to pay out for. So
absolutely. I think it's really important that you take advantage of all of those things. The tax laws are complex, but you need to make sure you're claiming everything you're entitled to. And that is just one very good example. That if you're working from home, there's costs associated with that. You can claim some of those costs. The money's better off in your pocket than it paying things to the government that you don't need to. So definitely claim everything that you're entitled to. And if you're not sure, speak to someone, because you get advice on that.
Yeah, and that's why this is where we come in, spotting the gaps on, is there anything else that we can do to make to reduce the tax liability? Is there anything that you've forgotten to claim and things? So I think
like driving your own car, for example. If you're delivering products to a customer, you maybe incurred some mileage. Write it all down. Keep records for that. That's a if you're delivering products the business has produced, that's a business expense. You can have credit for that. And people forget to, they don't keep the records. They forget to claim it.
Again, is the bookkeeping, record keeping, isn't it?
The record keeping is really so important because you forget what you've done. People think, oh, I'll come back, I'll do that later. If you come back 2 or 3 months later trying to remember where you were on this day, delivering what to who and how far away it was, you never remember that.
I struggle to remember my child's nativity schedule in school, so
Yeah, log it all, because it's all valid business expense, and you should record it all, claim credit for that where it's due.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, I know myself that sometimes I'll see something come up on my business bank account and I think, what was that? What did I pay? What, and I know it's legitimate, but then you have to go searching through for receipts or whatever.
That is with your business bank account. Imagine you just use a joint bank account. You just and all these Apple Pay tapping in and out. It'll be thousands of transactions where you, you don't want your accountants to go through them. Oh.
Yes. So the main thing I'm taking away from this is that it's very important to keep records and to log everything. That's sort of that's my key takeaway from this, because I think we've sort of touched on that so many times in terms of having a clear picture of where you are. This is the final question, I promise. What is the key thing that you would both like people listening to take away?
That's a very good question. I don't think there's one key. I think there's a couple of key things.
Yeah, let's go for it.
If we said, keep your records, so we can't use that.
You can say something you said before. Honestly, don't worry. If it's something that you said before and you just want to reiterate it, because I'll edit this bit out, but you know how it is when people listen to podcasts, sometimes in the middle they lose their way a little bit, and then when they feel it's wrapping up, their attention shifts back. So that's why I usually ask this question, because sometimes people can miss points. midway through?
I'll start, Wendy, with this one. It's a few things for me. I think, firstly, keep records for everything. Write it all down. Do it as you go along. It's so much easier than trying to spend days or weeks later on recreating things. And it might be a little bit time consuming, but the value in that, you'll appreciate it later on. Do it as you go along. I think the other thing, take advice. Businesses are complicated. There's so many different things as a business owner you have to do. As great as you are, you can't do everything. Don't be frightened of asking for help, whether it's with your website, your accounts, it could be anything. But just talk to someone who knows what they're doing. If it's your accountant, just trust them as well. They want what's best for you. They don't want you to have a big tax bill. They want to do the right thing for you. So trust them, share your information with them. They'll, if they're a good accountant, they'll do a good job for you, and they'll make sure you're claiming everything you should be. And
thank you. Did you want to add anything, Wendy?
No. I think that's all very valid, And I think one the general feedback from our client is that peace of mind that they have working with us, because they just don't want to worry about did I pay HMRC the right bill, or have I dodged 50 quid or 100 quid legitly or not. It's just that you just want to know, most clients just like, I just want to know the amount to pay, and you've done it. I have no worries. Just like us, when we get a plumber to do our bathroom, we know that it's all done correctly. We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that the biggest thing for me is just knowing that I'm compliant, and as long as I pay what I need to pay and I keep the records that I need to keep, I'm not going to get in trouble.
Yes.
I'm doing everything above board. And I think the peace of mind that gives you is not to be underestimated, actually.
Yeah, and stick to what you're good at, and get another expert to do stuff that you're not so good at. It's absolutely, it's a fair deal. We do it all the time.
Yeah. That's great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for everything that you shared.
No worries. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed it, please do leave me a review. That really helps other people to find this podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and do tell your friends about it too if you think that they also might enjoy it. You can find me at vickyweinberg.com. There you'll find links to all of my social channels. You'll find lots more information, all of the past podcast episodes, and lots of free resources too. So again, that's vickyweinberg.com. Take care, have a good week, and see you next time. If you've been inspired to start a podcast in 2024, I really recommend my podcast host, Captivate. Captivate were my top pick when I started podcasting 4 years ago, because of how easy it was for a complete novice like me to get started. I've stuck with them for the last 4 years because Captivate is still really simple to use. They keep adding great new features, like the ability to share ads like these, and they've just been really reliable. So when you're ready to start your own podcast, you can use the link in the show notes and get a free 7-day trial with Captivate.